Okay, today I'm changing how Northern newspapers show colonial politics moving from protest to revolution. I will use 4 articles from a assigned database, the New York Journal in 1774 and the Boston Evening Post in 1775, the Boston Gazette in January 1776, and the Connecticut Journal in January 1776. And my argument is simple. The papers first frame the crisis as a fight over taxation and representation, then as a wider imperial emergency, and finally as a world in which independence is becoming thinkable and even ordinary. Here, the writer is already making the constitutional argument that will shape the next 2 years. The paper insists that property, liberty, and representation belong together. That matters because it shows the colonial resistance is not just anger, it is a political theory. The article turns parliament into the problem and representation into the solution. This is exactly the mindset that helps explain why the first Continental Congress in 1774 mattered so much in class. Colonialists were learning to argue in the language of rights, not just protest. When I talk over the screenshot, I will stress that the article is still speaking inside the empire. It is not yet calling for independence. Instead, it says the colonials are being pushed toward a constitutional crisis by taxation from far away, by officials who don't share the consequence of their decisions. This article is useful because it reminds us that the imperial crisis was not only a colonial story. It has become a British political story too. The city members are promising reform, shorter parliaments, and end to corruption. The repeal of the American Acts. That means the colonial grievance has reached London in a serious way. For my video, I will connect this to what we covered in class about the road to war. The colonials are no longer just petitioning for relief. They are part of a large argument about what the British Empire is coming. The newspaper shows how the Boston Post Acts and the other coercive acts were understood not as isolated punishments, but as a test of whether the empire could still be held together without coercion. This is also a good moment to mention that political conflict in Britain and resistance in America are feeding each other. The same crisis that produced protest in Boston also reshapes parliamentary politics in London. This is the most important screenshot for the 1776 part of the story. The paper is no longer only describing resistance, it is describing a public mood in which independence is starting to sound normal. That doesn't mean everyone already wants to separation. It means the conversation has moved far beyond petitions and boycotts. I will connect this directly to the class materials on Lexington and Concord, Bunker Hill, the Continental Army, and the Continental Navy. By this point, the conflict is not just a dispute over taxes. It is a war that is reorganizing political imagination. The phrase, "a view to independence grows more and more general," tells us that people are beginning to imagine a political future outside the empire. So in this video, I would pause after that sentence and say that the article captures a turning point. Independence is not presented as a final answer yet, but as an idea moving from the margins toward the center of public discussions. This article helps me close to the narrative because it shows the dead end of reconciliation. The petitioners ask for peace and safety, but the answer they receive is refusal. The article then describes America as being an alarming state and says the people are facing the prospect of inexorable war and desolation. That language matters. It shows that by early 1776, even a paper that still talks the language of loyalty and reconciliations is admitting that political compromise is collapsing. In class terms, this is the point where the revolutionary situations becomes hard to reverse. Independence is not just an abstract slogan. It begins to look like a practical response to the failures of petitions, repressions, and war. If I have time, I will end by saying that this is why the Declaration of Independence should be understood as a culmination, not a beginning. These newspapers show the road leading there, rights language in 1774, imperial crisis in 1775, and a public sphere in 1776, where separation is increasingly imaginable. So the pattern across all four articles is clear. In 1774, the debate is about taxation and representation. In 1775, the crisis reaches London and the empire tries to hold itself together. In early 1776, newspapers are already speaking about independence, war, and the collapse of compromise. That is the story I want my audience to see.